Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we've got a bit more Scania to do. We're going to add some LEDs to the right hand side skirt, the one that opens for the control panel. Now I've been working on the truck here and there where I can, but I haven't filmed everything. But I think we can put together something that will make for a good video. Right, for the light bar at the bottom we got a set of these PCBs. They have yellow LEDs and resistors on the board and run a lead with a connector. You just need to provide some volts and they light up. But we're not going to use them like that, so I've been hacking. It's now a common anode array. The red wire connects to all the anodes, the positive end of the LEDs, and the black wire connects to each individual cathode, the negative end of the LEDs. That's going to let us light up the LEDs individually when connected to some electronics. Also, I jumped the resistors as the current limiting will be elsewhere in the system. Now whether you're modifying or not, fitting them is going to be the same. So let's remove the skirt and see how it all goes together. The opening side skirt is the easy one to remove. We just need to unscrew the hinge pin from under the chassis and remove the door. The other side is a bit more involved, but once it's off, fitting the LEDs is exactly the same. We're going to be working on the back side of the skirt, so I'm using a cloth to put the painted side on so you don't scratch it up. The LED board sits behind the light bar and just attaches to the same mounting holes, so it's nice and simple. The skirt also has a little conduit that directs the wires so they don't get tangled up when opening and closing the door. We'll also need to add another hole in the bottom for the bar wires to enter and run out the end. The PCBs come with some slightly longer screws, so we'll need to use them. Just be careful to check you have the right ones, as they're going to be extremely close to poking right through the skirt, especially if you use the longer screws and decide not to fit the PCBs. Once they're fitted, the PCB is securely attached, and it looks like all the LEDs match up with the holes quite nicely. We'll know for sure when we test them a little bit later in the video though. Next we're going to mark the conduit where we need to make an opening for the bar wires. Now I'm just going to make a little scratch with a knife. It wants to be directly above the wires so they end up looking nice and neat. Then there's 3 screws to take out so we can remove the conduit. Now I'm just going to use a Dremel to make an opening, like so. When we refit it, we just need to run the wires through and out the end. In addition to the light bar, we also have the 2 running lights. These are a bit more traditional Tamiya. We need to remove the 2 screws and the 2 LED clips, which leaves us with the mounts that fit 3mm LEDs. They just drop in and the clips hold them in place. Now you can get pre-wired 3mm LEDs that will work, just like the ones for the Tamiya MFC, or of course you can just solder them up yourself. For this setup, again, they're going to be wired up with a common anode. So the red wire is like a Y lead and it goes to the 2 anode legs. And of course the black wires go to each of the cathodes. Now we just pop them in the mounts and reattach the clips with the screws. Nice and simple, although I would consider painting the back of the LEDs with some black paint. Sometimes, depending on how things line up, you can get a fair bit of light working its way around the back and lighting things up that shouldn't be lit. Next, the conduit goes back on, which is easier said than done. With the 2 running lights it can be tricky enough, but with the extra wires from the bar it's going to make it a little bit of a faff to get everything in. I think the trick will be to roughly run the wires and install the 3 screws, but not so far that we start to pinch the wires. Then we position all the wires while gently pressing the conduit into place. Then once it's all just right, we can nip up the screws. Definitely one of those jobs where you have to take your time and not be afraid of starting again if it all gets in a bit of a tangle. I ended up getting it just so off camera, but here we are, all installed, plus a bit of heat shrink to keep the wires in order. Now I do like that Tamiya provide that little conduit. I'd really like to see something similar in other places on the trucks, like maybe running the rear lights, and of course on the other kits as well. It really does make it so much easier to make a nice tidy install. Next we can give them a quick test. Now I'm going to use a multimeter in diode test mode. It'll provide just enough current to light up the LEDs without having to worry about shorting anything out. They're not going to be at full brightness though, we would need the final setup hooked up for that. What we do is hook up the red probe to the red wire, the common anode. Then as we connect the black probe to the black wires, the LEDs will light up. Now they're not too easy to see with this lighting, so I'm going to turn off the studio lights so we can see what's going on with the LEDs. We've got the 4 bar lights, which all look like they're nicely lined up. And after moving the red probe to the other red wire, we have the 2 running lights. So that's all good then. So to refit the skirt, we just stuff the wires up into the control box, offer the skirt up and reinstall the hinge pin. Obviously when the LEDs have something to connect to, it's going to be a bit more involved, but for now they're going to be out of the way. The most important thing is where the wires bend at the hinge end, we need to make sure they can freely move without getting caught up in anything. And well, since that's going to be a bit of a short video, let's have a quick look at some of the other electronics, a bit of a teaser. First we have the TLC 5947 breakout board. It's a 24 output LED driver. Each output has a limited current, so no external resistors, and can be set to any of 4096 brightness levels. To control it, it has a serial interface that connects to the rest of the system. This one's going to go in the control box and run the side skirts and rear lights. When I get to it, the wiring from the other side skirt will join the tail light wires and run to the control box and the LED driver. Then from the LED driver, we just have 5 wires for serial data and power. At the front of the chassis, under the dashboard, there's another LED driver that's going to connect up to the front bumper and roof lights. Most of that wiring is already complete, as there's a board that goes behind the seats that routes all the connections. But we'll check that out when we do the front lights. What we can look up next though is the board that's under the roof. If we pull it up and off, remembering it's mounted with magnets, we can see the little cluster of electronics. The bottom board is the main controller with the processor and all the audio gubbins. It gets a direct connection to the battery for power and manages everything on the truck. There's a couple of wires that run down to where the MFC trailer connection usually goes, but instead of the trailer we have a USB port. It's used for flashing the processor as well as uploading new sounds for the engine and sound effects. Up on the top we have a little amplifier for the speaker, and next to it is a radio that talks to the trailer for wireless trailer lights. On the other side we have the wiring bundle that goes down into the cab. There's a couple of serial interfaces as well as some lighting channels for the roof lights. In front of that is the connector board for the roof lights, although that might need to move as it's a bit tight against the side of the roof. Above the speaker is a colour graphic LCD. Right now it just displays a slideshow of RC pictures, but it's tied into the expansion bus, so it'll be able to display battery voltage, system status and all sorts of other fun stuff. It's lined up with the sunroof, so there's no extra bits visible from the outside. Plus, if you turn the backlight off, it pretty much disappears. And of course, once we drop the roof back on, it's all out of sight and out of mind. Oh, and you might have spotted the 2 loose black wires in the last couple of videos. Those are antennas for the RC receiver module. Now, I'm only using this one for testing, hence it's hanging out in the breeze. The truck will end up with a receiver mounted inside the cab, with the antenna set up in the corner out of the way. Right, there we go then. A bit of wiring and a quick tease of the state of the electronics. It's all getting there very slowly, but progress is still progress. As always then, thanks for watching, like if you like, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!